That's how it's gonna be, a little test tube.
It's most likely to be a highly infectious virus.
Guy steps out of Times Square station, smashes it on the sidewalk.
Welcome to the Zero Dent Review, a show dedicated to handcrafted studies of genre fiction. I'm author DC McNeill, and I'm joined as always by Patrick Laverne, a dedicated husband taking literally any opportunity to avoid his baby at the end of the world.
Well, yeah, you know, I'm a busy man. I gotta get out and do things.
Yeah, I fully have a job on at the end of the world. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Absolute dog behavior from Peter in this reading. And as always, J.M. Anderson, a Yank so obsessed with his chosen field of work, he struggles to relax, just like in real life.
Well, yeah, but I get to sink a submarine, so that's kind of cool.
Dude, Dwight really got to me in this reading. Like, I was annoyed at him last time. This reading, he made himself like my mortal enemy. His behavior.
I thought that was the case.
I just unbelievable from Dwight this entire reading. Every opportunity he has to not be an absolute rube, he's like, nah, I think I am a lame weirdo. That's my thing now. I'm a rules guy. It's like, describe yourself as the enemy of David in 10 sentences or less. Welcome back to our continued study of the post-apocalypse genre, brought to you by the Zero Indent Patreon subscribers who make the shows and articles that shape Zero Indent. Today, as foregranted, we are finishing our discussion of 1957's novel On the Beach, reading chapters 8 through to the end. Disclaimers in this one for just, I don't know, man, suicide, kind of, sort of. Is it suicide? I don't know. There's moral questions to be had there. Yeah, I guess before we get kind of stuck into the weeds of this one, a bit of a shorter reading for us today on purpose, because I figured that, you know, being the end of the book, we probably have some big thoughts about like what this book even is, right? Because in our coverage of The Road, JM put a lot of tension on this idea of like, is The Road like a book that needs to exist? Like, what's its purpose? Is it a sufficient reason to exist just to capture this kind of melancholic vibe? And this book is playing it's swimming in similar waters, but it's doing slightly different things with these ideas. So I definitely want to get kind of stuck into that. But yeah, I guess we'll go to you first, Pat. Yeah, what did you think of this reading? And perhaps the book overall, if you did have big kind of summative thoughts.
Okay. Hold on, I'm still waking up, so apologies. But I'll tell you what, like if the apocalypse was coming, everyone's having these beautiful coders wrapping up their lives, I'd be in bed, you know, letting the radiation do its thing.
Yeah, you're not.
I'd be sleeping through my death. I'll tell you what.
100%. Yeah, you don't have like a poignant, you know, final moment
Yeah.
that would be perfect for cinema or television. You're like, nah, I'm bed rotting for 4 months.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah, no, it was I mean, it ended how I thought it would. Which, you know, everyone dying and no happy endings. But it was beautiful. I fucking love stories where everyone dies at the end. And I feel like stories that do that, you know, you got to really, really fucking earn that and that sort of ending. A lot of and I mean, there's only really one mood to get right for this kind of ending, which is, you know, an incredibly, as you say, poignant and pensive setup. And yeah, I feel like this book achieves that on all fronts for me. This might be the best everyone dies at the end story I've ever read.
Damn. All right.
Yeah. Yeah. It gives you all those the right feelings of you know, Sonder and ennui, a life lived, you know, what could have been, all that stuff. And yeah, like I mean, as you say, like, you know, these characters, as much as they, like, you know, have us wrinkling our brow at their foibles, such as like Peter, wanting to get out of the house in the final moments with his in the final days with his wife and kid. Like that stuff's, it complicates it in a really like satisfying way, I feel, in a realistic way. Yeah, and I think everyone's ending is like it makes everyone's endings really beautiful. Yeah, I love this book overall.
Nice. Yeah, I want to be clear because I'm gonna basically talk about all the men in this reading like they're absolute bastards, and I don't mean that in like a. I'm not trying to say that like it's bad writing. I'm saying it's good writing because they do things that, yeah, to your point, Pat, are so deeply human that they annoy the absolute shit out of me, because they just wouldn't happen in like modern fiction, and I think it's really interesting the way that. The complications to these characters, like, I mean, I guess Dwight is probably where I'll zero in on it the most as we talk through this reading, because you keep waiting for him to be the person you want him to be, right? You want him to break out of this like martinet kind of archetype and like give in to passion and kind of like in the final instance be there for Moira. And he simply is incapable. Whether it's this delusion that he's constructed of like going home to his wife, whether it's his culturation as like an American in the era he lives in, whatever whether it's his apparent faith, right? Whatever the reason, like he cannot be the character. He cannot have the arc we want him to have. And I think that's a really satisfying and poignant kind of portrait of this guy who. Like this is a person that I've met, right? This is like a guy that you know in the world, and I think in that way, in the final instance, Shute resists these characters becoming, he draws very high resolution characters in that way, as opposed to satisfying characters, and it makes for a frustrating read for me personally, is what I would say, in a good way, like it's like frustrating bracket. Not fully pejorative, but a little bit that where I'm like, yeah, like this imagination of what men can be is so limited by the perspective of what the time imagines men can be. And that's just like interesting to think about. Yeah. JM?
You left out a really crucial fourth option for like why he would have chosen to not be with Moira, and he could just legitimately love his wife. Like that's a possibility. He might, even if she's dead, he might legitimately be like, I still am too much in love with my wife. It would be cheating on her in my mind, even though I like this girl. I'm a married man.
Well, that's what he keeps saying.
Well, yeah, but I feel like that sort of fits into the delusion point a little bit.
Yeah, well, I guess the where I find that a troubling conclusion is like, even if that were how do I say this? Even if that were true, I'm like, I'll pick my words carefully. Even if that were true, in his behavior, this is going to sound insane, but I promise if you've read the book, this is exactly what happens in the book. His behavior, in a way, limits the possible happiness that Moira could have at the end of her life. And that, to me, is selfish.
Yeah, just put out, Dwight. Come on.
I would make the argument that she was happier with the relationship that she had with Dwight than she was before she ever met him.
I'm not saying that's not true, but she could have a more complete relationship with another man who's actually available.
Maybe. She never had that before. So the story might be telling us that this partial relationship was better than a full relationship with any other man in Australia. Wow, I did not mean to come down on Australia, but that's where
Wow,
I know.
Wow. Yeah,
So you stopped and thought before you talked. I did not.
The argument of like that, half a cup of coffee is better than no cup of coffee is like, I get it. I find that like a deeply like moralist position, and I think that probably does align with Shute's politics. Like, just to be really honest with you, he reads to me as a guy who like would agree with like Kierkegaard, for example. Like he just does feel like someone who I think I 100% like Jam. Like I think you're right. He 100% believes that, and that's what he writes into this book. And I think I find that to be like a morally insufficient position, but that's definitely what this book is trying to put forward. That like whatever this half relationship is they have is better than nothing, you know. And they still have these poignant human moments of connection, but I guess I want more for Moira, and I don't think that Shute does, if that makes sense.
It also is like unfortunately accurate to say that the time period in which this was written, there was a moral insufficiency in a whole lot of ways, especially relating to women and relating to how men deal with their own family. So that has thankfully been evolving. There's a lot of stuff that was morally superior in this time period. How how people interact with each other. There's a whole lot of stuff that's like was better back then, but men as far as husbands and fathers have improved when we view them, in this time frame. So yeah, it's interesting that Shute wrote that way because that was his mindset, because that was the time. Which again, I'll repeat, I would love to see this book written again now and see all of the differences, because like this whole thing would be so different.
Interesting. Yeah, what did you think overall of the novel or of this reading, if you don't have big tentpole thoughts?
A lot of the stuff Pat said, I would just go, yeah, ditto. The biggest thought that I had was comparing it back to The Road, and I don't even think it was halfway through. I think it was after like our first fourth of the book or whatever, and I was like, I don't know the point in finishing this book because it's already pointless. Like there is no chance that they survive this, and I never got that feeling from this, even though the whole book is literally about doomsday coming for you. Like I kept coming up with scenarios of like, why aren't they trying to go to a mountaintop? Why aren't they trying to go and form a society in like Antarctica? Why aren't they trying to take the submarine and go out into the middle of the ocean and do this? And like I keep coming up with things, and I'm like, I'm not even living at the end of the world, and they're not trying to come up with stuff, and I keep having these thoughts just off of the top of my head. So it's like they have already given up, whereas in The Road, it was the exact opposite. Well, like they hadn't given up, but there was none of the stuff that they have in this book. And they still have they have the ships, they have the people, they have the engineering team that they had, 8 months or however long it was, they could have been building all kinds of stuff. But it was like, no, everyone just accepted that like the desolation of the road was coming for them, even though the desolation of the road doesn't exist in this book. Like comparing the two just really kind of broke my brain.
I had a very similar thought.
You see, survival requires work, and we Australians, we don't like that.
Famously,
He just wants to go to bed.
We are famously allergic to work. We just want to put our feet up and have a tinny, brother. Like, come on. It is a really perplexing comparison of the. I think in some ways because no one's. I think part of what's frustrating about The Road is the man is sort of. It's an artifice that he's built that keeps them going, right? He's like invented this kind of framework of faith and the framework of like the fire and that like we're the good guys. No one in this book has any illusions about surviving the second that they get back from their final voyage, and Peter's like, yeah, like we're fucked. And everyone just like they fully send it. You know what I mean? They're like, fuck it, we'll do the GP. We'll die in this race. Like I don't know, there's an honesty to what Shute puts forward that I think, yeah, I didn't, it's weird. I wasn't sitting there, like I was reading this reading being like, why is no one trying anything? And I think the answer is that maybe they are, they're just not characters that we see on screen. I don't know, man. I truly have no idea what to do with that feeling that you're talking about, Jam, because I had that exact sequence of thoughts where I was like, why does this book, like, The Road feels like Cormac McCarthy sitting down and being like, my keyboard is on fire right now, and he just writes the shit out of a book and goes, he's doing like, it's like a victory lap of like, this, look at me do my thing. And then you read this and there's no ego in Shute whatsoever. He's just curious about exploring these characters in this situation. And they have no ego either. They have no illusions about them being the ones that will survive. Perhaps the closest we get is Mary and her difficulty accepting what's going to happen. But I don't know. There's a serenity in this book that I find really fascinating.
And everything with the military throughout the book kind of just exemplified that same confusion, because every single trip that they took was like only recon. Like, it was just trying to figure out, it was almost like they were trying to figure out how long do we have. I mean, I guess they were taking the radiation levels, and they were like hoping against hope, like maybe we can go and live in Chicago or something, right?
Yeah, but like, I think
they weren't actively trying to.
Yeah, how long do we have?
They weren't trying to find a solution.
Correct.
That's the difference, though. So all of these excursions were ultimately pointless, because at the end of the day, the only option was to leave Australia, get in the sub, and go somewhere else and hope that the radiation is gone. So going to measure it is still pointless. You have to come up with a different solution. So then the whole book just feels kind of, I don't know, we've already said it.
Right, but like, and yet, and yet I think it traces a version of like what living is in a really like poignant way, where it's like, yeah, well, isn't life pointless? Like, it all ends at the, it all goes away at the end of the day. That, we have this one life, and it's short, and it's unimportant, and there's a beauty in that, and there's a beauty in like human connection. I know that sounds so trite, as I'm like, I hear myself, all right? I understand that, but that is what Shute is doing. He's doing like a kind of a humanist novel at the end of the day. This is ostensibly like, if you set aside the apocalypse part of it, it's kind of just like a military drama mixed with like a soap opera, right? Like, that's kind of what he's writing. And he's trying to get at like the core of like the mundanity of existence. I don't know, man. The Road feels like it's trying so much harder.
Page play vibe almost. You just have a core cast of characters. A lot of it is just interpersonal relationships. Yeah. I also wonder if this survival subject is not in the in the collective conscience of people in Shute's time. I seriously don't know, but like, that's definitely such a strong theme that eventually happens around apocalypse stories. It's it's obviously always about survival, no matter the cost. But like, I'm just wondering, because this is written so early on, the conventions are still being hammered out. Like, maybe it just didn't really occur to Shute that like he could write a compelling story about people trying to survive this kind of scenario. I don't know.
I think that's
or he just found it more interesting to write about these characters. Obviously, yeah.
I suspect that's probably right. This era, you get like the Last Man. What we're reading for next session, I Am Legend, that comes out a little bit before this. You also have to wonder how much Shute's background as an engineer and like a military engineer informs this perspective. Does he just see a truth in the way that the arms race is going, where he's like, well, yeah, we're going to wipe ourselves out. That's the inevitable conclusion to all of this.
Well, there's a different reading from exactly what you're talking about, though, is that given his degree and being with the military, and given the day and age that this was, like, this was pre-internet, pre the average person having access to knowledge that only the scientists and stuff like had before. So like if the scientists told you something, you believed them. That's what life used to be like because they had the knowledge. So back when he wrote this, if the scientist, especially like the military scientist, if they tell you everyone is going to die, why bother trying to find a solution? Because the scientist said everyone is going to die, right? So yeah, that's a totally different lens. I never really clocked that. That like when I'm thinking about all of these solutions. Yeah, well, yeah, like all of these different solutions I'm thinking about, and like I have access to, the whole internet to be doing this research, and Peter has a telephone that could call an operator,
Yeah, I mean
Shute must have been so vindicated like a couple years after when he was watching the Cuban Missile Crisis on TV.
Well, yeah, I mean, I reckon he sat there and he was like, yes, my teleological framework was correct. And it's like, shut up, Neil.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I think that's probably right. Before we get too far into it, Pat, could we please do the summary?
Yeah. Okay. We open in the closing months of humanity. Peter drives to the naval base to avoid his family. What a swell guy. Dwight and Moira decide to go trout fishing, but agree they will not sleep together. For reasons the summary is sure JM finds ridiculous. Moira and Dwight go fishing. John Osborne wins the last ever Grand Prix. Melbourne winds down for good. Dwight takes the swordfish out to sink it. Peter goes home to his family. John takes his red pill in the driver's seat of his Ferrari. Peter recovers from the radiation sickness and plans to hide this from Mary. In the end, Peter and Mary die at home together. Moira drives out to the bay where she imagines the swordfish is and takes her red pill. And so the last humans on planet Earth breathe their final breaths and think their final.
Oof.
That was another thing I wanted to point out as a direct comparison with The Road is that in like it wasn't just all the people were pretty much wiped out in The Road, it was that the earth was like pretty much literally dead. This is the so exact opposite. Like everything on the planet is fine except there's no more people. And it's just a fascinating comparison.
The coolest thing or the most tragic thing is like if they could just survive for 5 years, this radiation will go away. Like, it's like this, it's this extinction level event that's temporary. It's real Death Stranding, Patrick. You know what I mean?
Is that temporary?
In theory, according to the second game.
Okay.
We can't get into it. I'm not sure that I fully understood the implications of the end of that second game. But yeah, there's such a deep tragedy, which is like, yeah, like if you can't go into a submarine and survive for 5 years, it's just not possible. Like there's no way, like you can do the math all day and you just never get to a place where you can survive. Well, that's what the book puts forward anyway.
I'm blanking on the name of the movie.
Hold
I know,
my Geiger counter.
It would have been so funny if I could have come up with it. Dryland Isn't a Myth. I've seen it.
Yeah, okay.
What's that movie?
Yeah, was that?
So they're just living on the submarine, like out in the middle of like the ocean.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just go full water world.
Yeah.
I mean the
Grow
long
plants on top of the water, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, the kind of long theory of like how you would survive a nuclear apocalypse is like you would have to make a settlement in Antarctica. Like that is truly like if there was a nuclear like winter, that's where you would have to kind of survive it. And it's a shame that they don't. I mean, it's again, this is early days, right? The imagination doesn't exist in the same way it does today, and like Shute hasn't had the benefit of the last century of novels just doing batshit stuff. But I have no idea what to make of the fact that no one is trying to survive. we talked about it a little bit in Silent Night when we discussed that film, which deals with a similar concept. But the difference here, perhaps, with the pill that they take is Silent Night, it's like immediate, where it's like if you come into contact with the storm thing that's coming, like then you'll die. But here they start to feel the effects before they take the pill. So they kind of get the confirmation that it's real. That's kind of the other differentiation is they feel the radiation sickness and then they go, like they're all kind of counting down from when they start to feel sick to when they take the pills. And to Pat's point about like kind of the poignantness of this, the beginning of this reading, we get Mary at home. It's in Mary Holmes' garden, the first narcissus bloomed on the first day of August, the day the radio announced with the studied objectivity cases of radiation sickness in Adelaide and Sydney. The news did not trouble her particularly. All news was bad, like wage demands, strikes, or wars, and the wise person paid no attention to it. What was important was that it was a bright, sunny day, her vast narcissus were in bloom, and the daffodils behind them were already showing flower buds. Now, Shute's politics are just on absolute display here. All news was bad, and again, these are the things that are compared to it in the simile, like wage demands, strikes, or war, as if wage demands and strikes are as bad as war. This fucking conservative weevil writing this book. Are you kidding me? What an absolute piece of shit.
That's horrible.
I know.
But
we know he hates communism.
I don't know if you remember, like that was one of the things that I had said, or one of the reasons that I said that she might be so inclined to not believe that this is happening because she's like sheltered in, and I didn't even know she had a radio. Obviously she has a radio, but she like overtly says, I do not listen to the news. So she does get all of her information from her husband. And I don't remember what point I was making on that, so rewind to the last episode we recorded and then pick up from there.
Well, it was during that argument where I was kind of like, Peter's being a little bit of a, I was saying that Peter was being very unfair because he kind of says to Mary, he's like, or he thinks to himself, ugh, these women don't live in the real world. If only they lived in the real world. And because he's frustrated that she won't come to terms with the fact that they're going to have to kill their daughter. She's having a perfectly reasonable emotional response to a situation, and he's like, ugh, women, am I right? And the thing I find kind of interesting about, obviously, yeah, that's just Shute. That's Shute, like, literally writing to you as the reader, in a way that I always find annoying with characters. Like, there's no reason for Mary to, I mean, if I'm being generous to Shute, and we shouldn't, it was the 50s. If we're being generous to Shute, perhaps the reason why Mary would think that wage demands and strikes are bad is because her husband's a military man, and that kind of indelibly signals a series of conservative values and perspectives on labor and wages and the economy that are like, largely fictitious because they are a necessary epistemic fiction for the military to like exist internally, right? If you want a military to function, there is a set of lies that you have to kind of progenerate through that military-industrial complex so that people can work in it. Otherwise, it would just be the worst job and no one would ever do it. And so you have to kind of buy into that. And
sorry, you finish your thought.
Well, I was going to say, and by extension, Mary kind of hoovers up some of that ideology just by proximity.
Yeah. Sorry, this isn't going to be very elegant, but like the institution of the military is always prioritized in terms of resources from the government. They are never the ones that need to go on strike or anything. They are they're held up and propped up by people who reliably and consistently go to work every day. The idea that like, oh, these fucking people, they don't want to work. They want more money for less work kind of thing. Like, I imagine that's the perspective someone like Mary has, where she can't conceive of like, why would anyone demand, more money for like just go to work kind of thing.
Well, yeah, because it's like, well, if your starting wage is
yeah.
$50,000 in 1950, yeah, you like, of course, that would be your perspective because you've never had to really think about that. And you know, like, and I want to put this in context, right? Like, you know, my stepdad when I was growing up, he was a RAF guy for 25 years, and he had a deeply conservative perspective on the world, and you know, it took a really long time for that to wear off, and a lot of me pushing boulders uphill with him in arguments to kind of get him to come around. You know, like he votes for Labor now, like he's kind of a reformed, you know, person post divorce. But one of the things that that I find most fascinating about Shute's perspective here is he even imagines that Mary, and this is the funniness of the way that I think women are thought about at the time. Right, I want to bounce this off the thing JM was saying before. She almost doesn't have her own interiority in a way. She kind of just has things Peter has told her and things Shute believes about women. Like, and I, you know, that again, that's just like of the time, and like I don't want to present that as pure ideology. Like that is also like historically what's occurring as the way that, you know, men view women at the time. But I think a sentence like that juxtaposing this real moment of like human truth, which is like, well, actually the thing that matters is that like my flowers are blooming and that's beautiful and it's a sunny day outside. Juxtaposing that with this really crass simile that demonstrates a lack of imagination from Shute, I think is a great demonstration of part of why this book is so compelling to me. Because it just feels indelibly of the age, in a way that I was maybe resistant to when we initially started talking about it. But yeah, I think that's a really great example of what JM was talking about last time, of like, there is a limitation of the way that this book can think the world because of when it's written. And again, I don't want to say that we shouldn't then be critical of that perspective, but rather that it's a productive exercise to observe those limitations.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch in here that sounds like I'm like defending the actions of these people, but I'm like, that was life back then. It's not to say that that was the right thing to do. It's just that was
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly right. And like, one of the things that happens is you get, and I think this is why the book has John in the story. So John is kind of like John is almost like the rationalist in this story. You know, if Dwight kind of lives in delusion, and so does Moira to an extent, and Peter is kind of, Peter has like one foot out the door the whole time. I think John for me represents like the guy who is the most tuned into the world and what's actually going on. You know, he and Peter have this absolutely cursed exchange where, you know, after this beautiful scene with Mary at the house, when she's like appreciating the world around her, Peter's like, oh, I gotta get out of this fucking house with my goddamn kid. And so he goes to Melbourne to visit John. Well, no, he goes to Melbourne I think he goes to talk to Dwight, and then he goes to talk to, and then they go to John, and they're talking about it, and John kind of goes, look, man, like, we've all got it now. Like, you've got it. We've all got it. This door, this spanner, everything's getting touched with radioactive dust. The air we breathe, the water that we drink, the lettuce in the salad, even the bacon and eggs. It's getting down to the tolerance of the individual. Some people with less tolerance than others could quite easily be showing symptoms in a fortnight's time, maybe sooner. I think it's crazy to put off an important race like the Grand Prix till Saturday fortnight. And then he goes on to say, like, yeah, I've told him to move it up. But he's so calm and rational about this, where he's like, yeah, like, we've all got it. Of course we have. Like, that's, yeah, no shit. And I do feel that that's a really great contrast to the other characters in this story, who are a little more, again, delusional sounds mean, but like I think they're less in tune with what's going on.
Well, that also just might be describing, you're just describing like an educated individual, right? Because he's literally the scientist.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
I feel like John would have progressive political views. He would have an argument with Peter about unions.
Oh yeah, he absolutely would. Yeah, John's the type of guy
Yeah.
who's like, well, Marx isn't my guy, but he kind of is onto something. Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say I relate to John being a nascent car guy. How he discovers his passion in this book, and I'm like, yeah, I see it.
It's a real one. Yeah, give it 2 years and Pat's going to be into F1. I guarantee it. It's going to happen. It's going to happen.
I was going to ask, was it in the chat with Rybold that we were talking about what's Chekhov's gun that never fires?
I believe so.
Because Moira was like warning Dwight, you gotta watch out for John. Like there's something wrong with him. You gotta watch out.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It doesn't really come to anything, does it?
Nothing.
Mm.
I mean, he crashes a car on purpose, so like he's not.
Does he?
I don't know.
When does he do that?
Well, okay. He's driving at 200 miles an hour in the rain, so that's on purpose enough for me.
I mean, he to be fair, he has he kind of has a bit of a Death Wish vibe. So maybe she's not wrong. Well, is it a death?
So I don't know. Like maybe that was like underneath the whole time and she could see it, but there's never any inclination of exactly what it was she was trying to warn Dwight about. So it's like Shute had this idea and then forgot to pay it off.
Well, I also think that potentially, now this is going to sound controversial and the most amount of cope, but I also kind of think that Shute is tuned into something here, which is that sometimes characters are like wrong about stuff. And I think that a lot of the time it's very tempting for us as people that read things and watch things a lot to be like, well, that didn't pay off. And it's like, well, maybe that character just has a view of the world that's incorrect or they've misunderstood something. And I like those inconsistencies because they build texture. However, it does sort of feel like he forgot to pay it off in this instance. I will defend you on this one.
Well, I found it interesting how she was talking shit about John to Dwight before they met John, and then she sees John, and they're like a bit abrasive, but they're like sort of genial enough. Like they have a very complicated history kind of thing. I feel like that makes a lot of sense as to why it's usually those kind of relationships where people have like a strong outward opinion, but like really underneath it's quite nuanced.
Yeah, you're 100% right. This is me when I'm like, this person, like, I will make sweeping generalizations about people. I'm like, well, that person's just like, they're a bad person or they're a piece of shit or whatever. And it's like, well, in reality, it's more
Never
complicated.
Heard you say that.
It's like, in reality, it's more complicated than that. But also the truth of it is they are a piece of shit. Like, if you get right down to the bottom of it. And yeah, I don't disagree. I think that one thing you could infer with this is that Moira is, and this goes back to the conversation we had at the start of this book, which you guys both largely rejected as my perspective on it, which is like Moira has some, I believe at the start of this book, at the end of the world, Moira has a social function as someone who parties. She's a kind of a loose woman. You could infer that maybe there's some history there with John. I don't think there is, but you could make that reading if you wanted to.
His cousin?
It's her cousin.
Oh, I forgot that. I forgot that. Scratch that. It was a different time, you guys. It was a different time. Okay? I forgot that.
Melbourne's a small place, yeah.
I forgot they were related. That makes way more sense.
I'm in Alabama, so like there's so many jokes about cousins to be made, but still.
She's my second cousin. No, I completely forgot that. That makes sense. Anyway, scratch that. Never mind. Well, we don't know for sure. Okay, other information that we get here from Peter, basically that like alcohol increases your tolerance to radioactivity, for a few like roughly a few days.
Is that a thing? I kept wanting to Google that.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. Go figure. That's my excuse anyway. That's what I'm sticking to. That's why I'm on the whiskeys, boys.
That's why everyone in the Soviet bloc was getting hammered all the time.
Exactly
after,
right.
Chernobyl.
It's called insurance, dude. You gotta build up that tolerance. But yeah, it's a really fun detail, and I love that we get this Douglas character who essentially, like, at the start of this book is told, like, if you keep drinking, you're going to die. And then the end of the world happens. And now it's basically a race to the bottom of, like, whether the liquor will kill him or the radiation will kill him, which is such a fun idea. Fun is the wrong word. You know what I mean.
Dude, imagine imagine a sequel where that one guy just stayed plastered for 5 years and he survives.
Fuck. Yeah. That would be funny.
I like how on like the last day or something, he says he has like 50 bottles to go or something.
I know. Well, yeah, because for those who aren't reading along, there's like in the it's like a club of some kind. I don't know what. Yeah, it's like
gentleman's club.
Gentleman's club. Yeah. You know the. Fuck. Somewhere Jordan Peterson just sat up in bed. You know, we don't really have social spaces for young men like this anymore. And it's part of like the decay of like masculinity in the US. But one of the they have this store of like really expensive sherry and port. And like the people that own the club are like refusing to sell it because it's like, you know, like it's like only for special occasions. And Douglas basically argues them down to like, well, if the world's gonna end, we gotta drink it. And he just made it his personal mission to drink every single bottle of port. And there's still 50 left, which is brutal.
Godspeed.
Listen, if there was ever a job that you could applaud, you know, good man. Yeah, I love that detail and that concept. Then I think the kind of next big thing, I mean, obviously I want to talk about the Moira and Dwight stuff in a big way, but kind of before we dig into that, what did you guys make of this sort of, I don't want to say ego that Peter and John end up having about the end of the world, but there's this discussion they have around like who's going to be the last people alive. And you kind of get the impression that they sort of want it to be them. Like Africa goes first, and then in the end, you know, Peter's like, oh, like it'll probably be the South Island of New Zealand, and then maybe the Indians in Tierra del Fuego. And it kind of reads as like, yeah, this sort of and then it's Douglas who gets really and then Douglas gets really annoyed that like the animals are going to live longer than them. And I was curious, James, if this clocked to you at all, because you're not Australian, but he says John's like the rabbit, the most resilient animal we know about. And then Douglas goes, the rabbit, after all we've done and all we've spent in fighting him, to know he's going to win out in the end. I was like, does JM know about the rabbits in Australia?
No. Okay, I totally misread that. I was reading that as like after all humanity is done and all humanity has fought against, and this is how we go out, and the rabbit is going to outlive us. That's how I read it. So I had no clue that was a specifically like Australians are pissed at the rabbit.
Yeah, Australians have beef with wildlife, like really intense beef with wildlife for some reason.
We've gone to war with two animals, emus and rabbits, and we lost both of them.
My dad has a never forget shirt with a picture of an emu on it.
That's so good. I'm gonna get one of those. I'll summarize a very long story, but basically, rabbits came across to Australia in like the 30s. There was a huge infestation, and the Australian government used them as an excuse to build a fence that they then used to as a justification to then steal Indigenous children. It's like one of the greatest tragedies in the history of our country, and it's a whole thing, and we can't get into it because we don't have enough time. But yes, rabbits were everywhere.
And you're mad at the rabbits instead of the government.
Well, the rabbits were a legitimate problem because they were eating all of the crops, and we couldn't get rid of them. And I think for a while it was like it wasn't just legal to hunt them. It was like if you see one, you have to kill it. Yeah, so there's a lot of history there. But I was like, yeah, JM definitely didn't clock this. And I've just circled it and written, "lol, fucked up." So that's fun. Okay, so then
That did explain that that dog that we saw, or the sub saw when
Yeah.
they were out.
I clocked that as well.
So-
yeah. Exactly.
So I really liked this because like that was, I mean, it wasn't really like a Chekhov's gun moment, but I was like, that's how you set up something, and then you like come back and address it later, even though there wasn't like a huge payoff or anything. It was just a little bit of info here, a little bit of info here, and then they tie together. So I wish they had done this something with John. If Moira was just later, she tells Dwight, "Oh yeah, I was just like angry at him. There's nothing wrong with him," like that's it. Or she just thinks to herself, "I was wrong," and then we move on. Like it doesn't need to be a huge thing, but just tying it up so then it's not the author making a mistake.
The dog thing is just general, like, animals survive radiation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because they have less mass, so they absorb less. I think. There's a I'll say this now because I've like skimmed through the film adaptation of this. In one of the original drafts of the screenplay for the adaptation of this, they didn't have the red pills, and the parents shot the children instead. Yeah. Which I was like, Jesus Christ. Yeah, so could be worse. Dude, Chernobyls are so good. Anyway, there's this thing that the book is doing, which is, yeah, the animals are going to live long. So we already said it, but basically, like, there's this it's cobalt radiation, and cobalt radiation has a half-life of 5 years, right? And it's specifically used by the Chinese in order to try and take this particular portion of Russia's land. And this starts, and then a miscommunication about that with America starts the war, which begins the end of the world. And the tragedy is that in 5 years' time, the world will be inhabitable again. But in theory, all life, as we know it, will be over. There'll still be life in the oceans because radiation can't penetrate a certain depth. But this concept of, like, and we kind of saw it with the submarine stuff in the previous reading, where the thing that's eerie is that everything just looks normal. So you've got to imagine, like, this is kind of an After London type scenario where all of the infrastructure still exists. It's just all of the humans are gone, and nature's going to reclaim everything.
I don't remember the name of the seaman who jumped out of the sub and went back to America. But you gotta imagine that he went back to his house and, like, his family was there. Like, everyone would be where they died, So it really puts it in a different context when he's, out on the fishing boat a couple days later when they pass him, and he kind of looks like he's just having a grand old time and just having fun catching fish, but he, like, just a couple days ago found his wife and kid dead in his house, along with all of his neighbors and all of his friends and everything.
Human Swain was his name. R.I.P.
I imagine that affords you a certain freedom. Once you can confirm that with your own eyes, you're like, all right, it's over. I'm just gonna do whatever I want for the last remaining hour.
I would simply find a way to survive. I think probably is what I would do. I'd solve the. I'd solve it.
Chuck back some rads.
Oh, dude, I'd be.
Is that the pill for that?
Rad-X is the one that takes radiation away in Fallout.
Right.
Yeah. No, wait. No, Rad-X gives you immunity. Rad-Away is the one that takes away the radiation. Yeah. I'd simply just take that.
Part of me, I kept wanting to ask, but then I was like, that's stupid. Don't ask that. Like, I kept thinking, like, is there a radiation pill? Is that a thing? Because video games have, like, taught us that.
Yeah, there is, but it doesn't work the way that you imagine it does. Essentially, like, radiation goes away over time. The problem is how do I explain this simply? My understanding, which is probably fully incorrect, is, and this is again from, like, high school biology, but it's basically like a question of like volume, where there's a certain volume of radiation where it doesn't matter if you like make that radiation go away, you're still fucked. So it's like about thresholds kind of thing, which is why like chemo and like radiation therapy exists, because you can tolerate a certain amount of it. But if you kill enough cells, then you can't regenerate enough cells to survive, sort of thing. Or you're going to destroy an organ that you then can't replace. So what you really, I guess the ideal scenario was sort of organize a submarine sort of organ harvesting operation type thing. That's your best chance of
jeez.
surviving.
I think people take iodine pills as preventative preventative measures for radiation.
Yes. Yeah. Wait, isn't iodine radiation, Patrick?
Is that? Oh, okay.
I think that's not right. Let me check. Hang on.
It's just acclimating the body, just getting used
You're
to
building up the tolerance. I thought iodine was like the one that you take as radiation treatment
to block radioactive iodine absorption during nuclear emergencies.
Huh. Okay.
And they just sell these at pharmacists and stuff like that. Apparently.
Dude. Well, I would simply load up on that and I'd be fine. It is pretty funny that like that literally no one is like, should we be doing anything about this? Like even John is like, well, time to drive my car. Yeah. Acceptance,
So,
you know.
This is a history question that I'm putting towards you because apparently you're an expert. But when did survival bunkers become all the rage? Because I gotta think by the 50s, like at least the government would have had survival bunkers out the wazoo. And
it's a good question. I feel like the
there's
60s.
no mention of that at all in here.
Yeah, I feel like the Cold War.
I imagine fallout shelters are based on very specific things that happened.
Yeah, it really
like video game fallout.
Yeah, it really does. It really does feel like a Cold War thing. Oh no, World War I, World War II, and the Cold War. Oh yeah, of course, because Hitler had a fucking bunker where he killed himself. Yeah, I guess they've been around for a while. Oh, but they don't become underground until the Cold War. Most of them are above ground bunkers. For some reason. They hadn't really thought that one through. Nuclear bunkers, became popular after World War II. Like underground ones. Go figure.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about like, they've got ones that are like in the heart of a mountain and all this other kind of stuff. And I was like, how long ago did they start building those things? And because this is so military focused, like if this was, civilians, then I would not at all expect them to be talking about highly classified military bunkers that are built to last for 20 years or something, because that's why they built them, you know? I mean, like that was one of the entire concepts of one of the Terminator movies was we got to get to the bunker because we built it for doomsday.
Well, that's part of like why the Seattle thing is so troubling, because it's like, well, surely no one could have survived, but maybe they could have. And this is where I think that like Shute is how do I say this without sounding mean? Shute is doing a thing here which is deliberately not being completely accurate. Like, I would imagine that the president of the United States at the time would have a bunker that they would go to, right? Assuming that they have time to get there. But I think Shute is deliberately being like, yeah, none of that matters in the final instance. In the final instance, we're all dead. Which is the point, right?
And I guess it's I don't know what the average book length is, but this feels very short to me. It felt like a comparatively easy read. So if he had added in all of this other stuff that we've been kind of throwing around, then he could have doubled the book size for kind of no reason, because he's more interested in the people accepting that death is coming and then how do they react to it. So all of the stuff about like you could have maybe survived this way and like that's not the point. So I get why he cut it.
Yeah. I mean, It is a decently long book. It's 300 pages in the version that we have. The book we're reading for next episode, I Am Legend, is like 150 pages by comparison. Like it's weirdly long considering what it is, because it's mostly dialogue, right? Like if you think about The Road is a lot. I mean, obviously the complication of the formatting makes that book feel longer than it is. But that book is like a lot of prose. This is mostly dialogue.
Yeah, and you'd have to read one sentence 5 times before you could sort of understand maybe what he was trying to say.
Yeah.
McCarthy.
Well, it depends. If you're an expert like me and Patrick, you just get it first time. So it's actually pretty easy for me to understand. Actually, I got it all first time. So speak for yourself, Mr. American Education System. No, you're right. It's a vibes book more than this one is very much a playing it straight. There's very little. I don't want this to sound mean. There's very little poetry in this prose. It's very straightforward and conventional. Which kind of it makes sense. Like, right, Shute's a military man. It's kind of written in the style of almost like a police report at times. Very kind of procedural and logical. Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you're rereading The Road, you're reading it not for the characters, not for the story, you're reading it for the prose.
Yes.
If you're reading this, you're not reading it for the prose, you're reading it for the characters or for the story.
Yeah, exactly right. And I've been yelling about this for like the last 8 years, but I think that part of what that means is that, the best books are ones that do both, right? Like Glass Hotel is maybe like the apotheosis of doing both to the best degree, where it's like you read it for the prose and you read it for the characters and the story, because it's doing all of that to like the nth degree. Like Emily St. John Mandel turns up every dial she possibly has in Glass Hotel and produces like what might be one of like my favorite written books of all time. Even if it's not one of my favorite books, it's up there as, one of my favorite books. But I think for Shute, he's not really a stylist in that way. He's a guy who knows people and he wants to write about people. He's not necessarily agonizing over the rhythm of a paragraph in the way that some other authors do. Which is fine. That's not a judgment. That's just a different set of priorities.
Now that I'm thinking about it, his idea of like the, what would you call it, the arc of a sequence or a scene, or like the rhythm of what he chooses to show is always seems to be like an undercut at the end. Like it always ends on some predictably banal ending. Like, I don't know, Peter goes down to the docks to see Dwight to get a mission status or something like that. What are they going to talk about? Has there been any new discoveries? And it's like, nope, it's just like the same thing. They have a mysterious signal from Seattle. They're going to go there. Peter has a job to do. It's like everything that Peter thought was going to happen before he went there, and then it is what ends up happening. And I think that's sort of what like gives this whole book such a low key vibe. It's like there are no like surprises. Everything comes back down to where it started. But because it's a book and it's a novel, you expect some sort of climax to happen, or like, I don't know, some sort of twist to happen, but it never really does. Mm-hmm. And in that way, it sort of still subverts your expectations a little bit and like keeps you invested. At least it did for me.
Yeah, you keep expecting a structural switch up or something.
The end of chapter 7 here, I think, like really exemplifies what he's talking about, because they just finished the Grand Prix and they're stripping the parts from the other cars and stuff, and there's like not really any dialogue at all. It just goes from them stripping the dead carcasses, and like the way that that's framed is just kind of horrible, because they're talking about the cars, but then people have died there, which is why they can use the cars. And it just ends with, it was dark before they finished and they drove back to Melbourne in the rain. And that's it.
Yeah. Also, it's Melbourne. Melbourne.
Yeah. As soon as I said it, I was like, I'm getting corrected. This is
Melbourne.
That's how it's spelled. Okay. I know.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm like, I can't help you. You just have to get it right. Otherwise, hey, if you're listening to this and you haven't given us a 5-star review on your podcast catcher of choice, take a moment to do that now and just write Melbourne. But like kind of phonetically how you would say it. Just write that as your 5-star review. Really confuse some people.
Speaking of proper pronunciation, if you haven't given us a review,
hey man, any
what a
opportunity,
segue.
always be plugging. Listen, man, that's my job. You know, a lot of people wouldn't have the guts to ask for a review at a time like this. I'm built different. It is curious to me how little, like, and this is why the prose stands out to me so much when it is present. Like, you know, when Mary's sort of having her moment of like recognizing the beauty of the moment. It's really telling, or it's very revealing to me when Shute does choose to have prose reveal certain information versus dialogue. You know, one of the things they tell you when you're studying creative writing is, and especially if you're prose, you know, if you choose to write prose, which I do because I cannot write poetry to save my life. Eminently jealous of Eric, the fact that he can write poetry. It's just not something I can do. And one of the things with prose is that what you choose to have be free and direct discourse from a character's perspective, as in like narration in the text versus dialogue, is a tricky thing, because if you have too much prose, it can feel like because it takes time to read prose, that can have an effect on the pacing of a scene, where it's like if you have a huge amount of prose between two people saying 2 lines, it can feel like a real disconnect in a conversation. But then on the other hand, if you have too much stuff in dialogue, it can feel like characters are explaining the world to each other in a way that feels unrealistic. I think Shute does a great job of never having... I don't know how he does it, and maybe it's just the tone of the dialogue and the fact that it's written as Australian, you know, dialect, but it never feels to me that a character is like looking at the camera and explaining the world. It always does feel naturalistic throughout the book.
I think that's a lot easier to achieve in film than in just the written word, because if 2 characters are out there talking and one of them pauses, you're watching them, and if you're the director or whatever, you could just, you see something, so you know that, okay, this guy just keep fishing. You don't have to talk. You don't have to say anything. Just keep throwing your line out and don't say anything for a little bit. But if you're a writer and all you have is the last sentence of dialogue that you wrote, you don't have that visual to spark to fill in those gaps eloquently, kind of the way you were talking about.
Totally, right? And if you then want to put a sentence in to like explain the way that someone's pausing, if you get the timing and the rhythm of it wrong, it might feel like too long of a pause or too short of a pause. Like, or it might be like, well, why would the character be thinking about that right now? And so I think so much of what the novel can do as a medium is it gives you access to such subjectivity that, you know, obviously a filmed medium doesn't. You know, subjectivity in a film medium, you have to read into, like, you know, John Hamm looking into the middle distance over the DP's shoulder. You have to read into his expression, you know, thoughtfulness or coyness or like whatever he's thinking or feeling, as opposed to a novel where the subjectivity of the character combined with the prose, combined with the pacing, combined with the paragraph, combined with the dialogue, that all builds out that feeling. And you know, when you find an author who is at the top of their game as a stylist in a way that Shute just isn't interested in being, right? It's not that he can't do it. It's not what this book is interested in. I finished Sea Scraper this week, which is a Benjamin Wood novel. And it's like maybe stylistically the most incredible book of the last like 12 months. Just stunning to read. And he has the knack. He has the Emily St. John Mandel knack. He has the Patrick Rothfuss knack, right? These authors who can just work at a prose level that is kind of, at a tier above what the market is demanding and a tier above what most authors can produce. And I guess I'm curious, the next novel we're going to read, I Am Legend, is mostly prose. Because that's, if you've seen the film, you'd know that, like, that's a story about a guy where there's no other guys for most of the book. So it's mostly a guy thinking to himself the whole time. And I thought they'd be interesting novels to put back to back because they're kind of the opposite of each other, right? This is a book where no one can imagine that there's a solution to the end of the world and that survival's possible. It's all dialogue. And then I Am Legend is the one survivor of humanity at the end of the world, and it's almost all prose. So I'm very curious where we end up landing, after we read that in comparison to this, and what we end up holding up as our preference, I think. Just normal stuff, just novels, a really complicated medium, super easy to talk about. Should we take a quick break and then talk about Moira and Dwight, and then the end of the world? Chill stuff. Really normal. Lovely. Well, we'll be right back after these messages. Stick with us. I promise there's some fun to be had. We'll be back. I think we'll find out. This post-apocalypse unit is sponsored by the Maynard Trigg series. You can find these books at underink.press. They are my science fantasy coming of age novels. If you like post-apocalypse fiction, I guarantee you'll like these novels. They take place in a dying world far above the earth in the skies. They are fantasy novels, they are mystery novels, they are coming of age. If you enjoy the things we talk about and the way we talk about them, I guarantee you'll like these novels. Use code REVIEW10 at checkout. That's REVIEW10 at checkout for 10% off the original hardback of the first novel. That's this one right here. Once again, REVIEW10 at underink.press to grab your copy of the first Maynard Trigg book today. All right, welcome back. I guess let's talk about the Dwight and Moira thing, because it's kind of like the last thing that happens in this book, really. So they have this initial conversation where Dwight kind of says, I'm going home quite soon. I've been away a long time, but it's nearly over now. You know the way it is. I've got a wife at home I love, and I've played it straight with her the 2 years that I've been away. Wouldn't want to spoil that now in these last few days. And Moira's kind of like, yeah, look, I get it. And he says, or she says, I wouldn't want to start a smutty love affair when I'm dying in a week or 10 days' time. I've got some standards too now anyway. So it's almost like in this final instance, and I've been quite rude in my notes to Dwight, to be fair, where he's such a martinet. Like in the final accounting of his life, he won't break the rules in this final moment, even at the very last instance. To the point where like he won't sleep with Moira. He insists on sinking the submarine because that's what the US military would have wanted, even though there's no one, like, there's no foreign power to like take the submarine if he doesn't sink it. Like it's all of it is such a it's so patently absurd and such clever characterization, because to your point, Pat, that you were sort of talking about before, the whole book you kind of read it waiting for Dwight to do the right thing and like to be with Moira and for them to like get together. You kind of wait for that final twist of like, yes, in the final instance he will give in and have this final moment of happiness, and instead he finds joy in not doing that, which I find it morally insufficient, but I think it's a really well considered type of character, to the point where he even fusses over like which car they're gonna take. And she's like, dude, it doesn't matter. Like, we'll just take my dad's car. Like, he's not going to care. And he's like, oh, I'd feel badly about it.
If I'm being a bit generous, I'd I think perhaps Dwight it's perhaps his actions are trauma responses.
Mhm.
You know, he may be feeling it more than the other characters around him. I think that's also compounded with the fact that he's, like his unique culture, being early 20th century American, sort of church going man. Uh, I think like, yeah, I think he doesn't want to think about it, and he hasn't. And yeah, I think that sufficiently explains his behavior to me.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It's one of these things of like, I understand why he's the way he is. I just find it like a really insufficient position. Like he even says like, that's the way I was trained and I'm not changing it now. If there's an order, I'll obey it. Like Shute thinks Americans are idiots is the other thing. Like, I don't think you're supposed to read this as particularly noble. This rhetoric is the exact rhetoric that they are hearing in real time at the Nuremberg trials on the radio, right? I was just following orders. I was just doing what I was told. You can see in a way that Shute kind of imagines this American perspective as I don't think he thinks Dwight. I think he thinks Dwight being a martinet isn't just kind of stupid in this final moment. I think he thinks it might be like a moral failing.
I would push back on that because I didn't get that at all. I could very much see that argument from. I think that Dwight is separately talking about his military duties, which is the following the rules bit, which he feels obligated to do because he swore an oath to follow the rules, versus not cheating on his wife is no longer about following the rules necessarily. I think that's supposed to be much more of like a love obligation rather than a duty obligation, if that makes any sense. So it's really interesting to me that you see him not cheating as the moral failing when it sounds like Pat and I read it where he was just like, he's not into it. And then like we didn't really think much about it after that. But it really, really stuck in your craw.
It did.
That he didn't.
I was already primed to be antagonistic toward him though after the scene in the art gallery. Like it was just one of those things of like he already bothered me enough that I was always going to read this as a pejorative behavior. Like I think for me it's the summation of his person that I find repulsive, not the individual actions. Right? I attribute them all to like a total worldview that I completely disagree with. And I guess when I say moral failing, I suppose what I mean is like he's not cheating on his wife, she's dead. Like I think like at a materialistic level, he's just wrong about this. And I understand that's what the book is doing. I'm not, I'm not trying to make bones about like that he should have made one decision or the other. I'm trying to draw out the fact that like the book is putting this character in this position and saying, what do you think about this choice he's making? And my response to that is, I think it's the wrong choice. I think that if this book was written today, this would be well, your wife would want you to be happy, wouldn't she? That would be the way that this would be framed. So I also think it's of the era as well.
But also, like, the inference is that in order to be happy, he has to sleep with Moira, which is not necessarily the truth, because they've been having a blast together without having a romantic relationship.
That's true. Yeah.
I kind of think that it's not necessarily that Moira is entitled to, as Dwight puts it, a smutty love affair, but like it is interesting to think about how Dwight he's said to be quite a bit older than Moira, and he's like, he's done all the passion stuff. Like he's and Moira remarks on this too. She's like, oh, he's had the life, he's had the wife and kids and the house and all that. Also, sorry, I'm not. I hope this isn't incredibly ageist, but like, also, Dwight may, if Dwight were a younger man, perhaps he would want to have a night of passion with Moira, but because he's a bit of an older man, maybe he's just like he could, but he I don't know, he doesn't need to. It's too much effort, kind of thing. Like,
I could see that.
It's selfish, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah,
he doesn't he doesn't consider that Moira is a much younger person who wants to have those kind of things.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm trying to. You've more elegantly said the thing that I was trying to say, which is like, yeah, I read it as selfish in that way. The best comparison I can put that might paint in some context of this is, if you're not reading along, the age difference is basically Annie and Jeff in Community, right? Where it's just too much by like 5 or 6 years for it to ever be something that could work properly. And yeah, it comes across, it's funny because it comes across as selfish, not because Moira's entitled to it, but because she makes her intentions pretty clear early on, insofar as you can make your intentions pretty clear in this day and age. I don't know. It's a tricky one.
And ever since Moira, does, as you say, like, as much as as you can make your intentions clear with decorum and all that, it's not like she can switch up, really. Like, that's not a privilege that's given to women in this time. Like, Dwight doesn't really like consider that she's like sort of like committed herself to him a little bit, or like hedged her bets on him as like potential partner.
You kind of get the implication that before him she was sleeping around a lot at these different parties and things. Granted, I don't know how far that phrasing goes, like back in the day and age, but like when like Mary is first talking about her, she talks about her partying and getting around, or they use that phrase that is so ambiguous. I was like, okay, she's hooking up with just tons of guys. So what just hit me while y'all were talking is that the story does make her come off as kind of a victim, which maybe like kind of explains why David has such a strong reaction. Because she does everything to help out Dwight, and what does he do for her besides like inviting her on the sub and giving her a tour?
Exactly.
I mean, yeah, they go out on dates and stuff, but he does not try to provide for her in the manner that she provides for him. And then like at the very end, when they're going on their fishing trip, and he's like, I can't be what you want me to be. And she's like, yes, I've accepted that. And this is still the best thing that I have at the end of the world. And so then you're kind of left with, she's done all of this stuff. You haven't done anything for her, and you can't give her more. But then you shouldn't have the right to feel that your opinion should sway his internal motivation. So like the story is written to make her feel like a victim, but we shouldn't be treating her like that, because that takes away whatever agency that he has to make his own decisions.
Well, that's kind of the tragedy. Yeah, exactly. That's the tragedy of the situation they're in, right? And that's why it's so effective, and that's why it like produced such a strong emotional reaction from me, is that it is this like they find themselves in this tragic position. Many such cases where it's like, if only it was a different time and place, if only we'd met under different circumstances, right? And they didn't, and this is the situation they find themselves in. And she ends up being like, I think maybe the way to say it is, she's victimized by the context and circumstance of how they meet and their relationship to each other more than she's victimized by him specifically. Even although I do agree with what you said about, the fact that she does everything for him and he does absolutely fuck all in return.
Well, it's hard to tell what he does for her that we don't have context for because we don't really understand that age and time. Like he spends hours and hours tilling her father's land. Like that's got to say something, right?
Oh yeah, but he does that because it's something to do. Like I don't know. Even that's even that's for himself. Like I don't know.
Well, I have a take on this, and I think this might be more of like, you know, Shute's internal politics and stuff, you know, outdated politics, to be clear. That what Dwight does for Moira is basically give her a redemption. The fact that she is set up as this loose woman, she's sort of like bit of a, what do you call it, like a, you know, someone who has like little prospects kind of thing. Dwight, the fact that their relationship remains platonic, I think in Shute's eyes is giving Moira like dignity that she didn't have before this, or like that this situation at the end of the world is giving her. And I think that Shute thinks that is like the most important thing that's missing from Moira's life, and I think it's sort of, I think the fact that the book ends on Moira sort of reinforces that. Like he clearly thinks that like Moira is like sort of the main character of this book. Yeah,
that's a really good point. I hadn't picked up on that, but that's definitely a redemption arc because she's initially painted as the party girl who we're gonna get to come and distract with all of her wild partying ways, and then at the end she's not even drinking and
yeah. Exactly.
Well, in the final instance, she definitely is drinking and driving
at the same
time. Hell, yeah. But yes.
But she does stop for a little bit and she takes up classes and she betters herself and all that. Well,
in my opinion, her drinking at the end is medicinal because it helps with the radiation. So she does literally get that information.
She has to take the pill with it.
Yeah, immediately starts drinking. Yes, that is really well observed, Pat. I think that it is a kind of it's respectability politics down to a number, right? And I think it's a shame. Obviously, it's of the time. I understand that. I think it's a shame that Shute can't imagine some other version of redemption for Moira. And it's a shame that she doesn't get to have it. And that's the tragedy of the end of the world, right? That even in the final instance, when all of the accounting gets done and all of the ledgers get wiped clean, she's kind of left holding the bag. And there's no resolution to that. She bettered herself in Shute's eyes to no end. Pour one out for Moira, I guess is the... but yeah, so they go fishing. Before they do that, Dwight has nothing on. He bumbles about Melbourne and ends up, bumping into Peter and helping out with the car. Some, uninteresting, busy talk, which is sort of what this book is doing at the very end, which is great. It's so pedestrian. I love it. I did want to call out one thing that I circled on my notes, which is we get a transition where Dwight goes to Peter's shop to help with the car. Dwight goes to John's shop to help with the car, and Peter's there. And we get what I've coined now as the George Lucas handoff, where... we talked about it a lot over the years, but the idea that if you want to transition from one character to another, just have them interact in a scene, and then instead of following the one that you were following, follow the other one, right? So it's in A New Hope, it's you start with Leia, and then she goes and meets the droids, and then the droids go to the planet, and then the droids meet Luke, and then Luke meets Obi-Wan, and then Obi-Wan takes Luke to Han. You just kind of follow this string of characters. And you have this handoff where Peter's like, oh, I've got to go home now. And yeah, we go from Dwight's perspective seamlessly into Peter's. And it's really slick. Like I almost didn't notice that it happened. It's just really great writing. Dwight smiled, left her to hold the baby. Peter nodded. I got her a garden rake and a bottle of dill water, but I must be back by 5. He left half an hour later, got into his little car, and drove off down the road to Falmouth. He got back to his flat on time and found Mary in the lounge, the house miraculously quiet. How's Jennifer? He asked. Like, it's so smooth. I was just very impressed by, and he does it throughout the book. His character handoffs are quite elegant.
It's such a hard section to even think about, and thankfully, so like we had talked about earlier, like so many fathers are doing so much better now. But he was literally like, they asked him like, "What are you doing here?" And he was like, "Oh, the sounds of my dying baby. I couldn't put up with that noise. I had to leave."
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to undersell it. It's a really tough read. Like this entire reading, it's just really hard watching these men fail the women around them. In kind of every instance. Peter, Peter, he goes through this like mental exercise of like, oh, well, I'm on the upswing. Maybe I've got another week left. I can't let Mary find out. Like just
that was something else I wanted to talk about of another like Chekhov's implementation that I didn't understand, because I thought the point of that would be that he fakes taking the pill because now he's like, I don't know how much time I have left. Maybe I'm the one human that's immune. So he fakes taking the pill so that Mary can think she's dying next to him, and then he ends the book potentially alive for we don't know how much longer. But then he takes the pill anyway. So there was this whole setup of he's no longer dying, but then he takes the pill. So then what was the point of the initial, I don't know, the way that flowed just kind of didn't sit well with me.
I kind of think it's so he can make that decision, because he tosses up between spending it with his family and going with Dwight in the submarine.
Yeah, there's kind of 2 big decisions that are to be made at the end of this book, right? It's will Peter decide to live longer and go on the submarine, and what will Moira do? Will she ask to go with him? What's her plan? And I think it's to what Pat said at the start, which is like it complicates Peter's character as well, where you get to experience him have this really impure thought of like, oh well, I could prolong my life at the expense of like my family, and you get to see him have that thought process and decide, no, I'm gonna die with my family. And whether you think that's like the morally correct thing or not is gonna, your mileage just gonna vary. But I think it serves to complicate what would otherwise be a fairly settled decision, right?
I'd have to read it again. I didn't think that. I thought it was kind of more of a passing thought of going on the submarine. I never took it as that much of a decision, because like he spent the entire book saying, "I have to be home with Mary when the end comes."
Mm-hmm.
So then it kind of just seems like the thought of going on the submarine was never, at the end here, was never a serious one, because he's been talking about being with Mary at the end. So again, I was like, why did you cure him for him to just die anyway?
Well, it's to be clear,
I see the point, but
yeah, he's not cured. It's that the John at one point is like, yeah, like some people, they get better for like a week or whatever, and then they get bad again. So like he's gonna die anyway. But it's
up to the resilience of the individual, he said.
Yes. And I think this speaks to the larger theme at play here, which is that Peter is a guy who doesn't really like his family. He doesn't really like spending time at home. If you really shake it all out, he decides instead, the last like 5 months of his life, he spends most of it not with his family and instead on the submarine because of this sense of duty, and because he has this belief in the kind of, and Shute believes this as well, this kind of like elegance of work, this dignity of work. this deeply conservative notion of like, well, you know, you have to serve, and that's the important thing. And to JM's point, you know, men have come a long way, and our perception and comprehension of masculinity have come a long way. And I think the passing thought he has about the submarine is, I think, in service of that, where it's him really thinking about like, oh, well, in my final instance, do I want to be in the framework, right, of work, of my job, of my career? Is that preferential to being with my family? And, you know, thankfully he chooses to die with his family. I think that's like probably the right thing for him to do, but I'm fairly confident that's what it's trying to do, is put those two things back in tension with each other.
Yeah. I like how you described it. It impure thoughts. Like, yeah, that is exactly what it is compared to his family. Like what he, I don't know. I feel like it's a pretty obvious like choice from a morality perspective that he should spend it with his family. And yeah, I feel like it's galvanized a little bit by the fact that he does have these impure thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes it a more impactful decision that he does choose to do the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, like, to be clear, like, I don't think Peter's like a terribly awful husband. Like, you know, he does, you know, he does have his faults, but like, a lot of the time, like, he is, you know, he's patient with Mary, and like, you know, he's a husband of the time, you know, he leaves his kid with her, but like, he's like, I don't know, he's compassionate, and he's like caring and all that. Yeah. He at the end of it, it seems like he does everything right by his family, I'd say.
Yeah, I think he's definitely, I mean, Dwight is kind of his foil in that regard, right? Where it's like, and what, you know, whatever Shute's politics would land on this, but like, to me, it's like Peter is like the version of a man who makes the right choice in the end. And I think by comparison, Dwight is the man who makes the wrong choice in the end, is kind of how the book sort of reads to me in a way. Where it's like, yeah, Dwight goes out and he sinks the submarine for no fucking reason. He doesn't, you know, he isn't with Moira in the complete way that they could be for seemingly no reason also. And it's like, yeah, Peter is the kind of Peter's the version of a guy that Shute wants you to be. Dwight is like the dumb American who can't get his shit together and do the right thing. Obviously it's more nuanced than that, but you know what I mean.
Dwight really said no girls allowed.
He really did. What a dick. And he's like, oh yeah, we won't have any booze on the submarine either. It's like, brother, it's the end of the fucking world. Come on. I hate him so much.
I don't want it to come across like I'm defending him that much, because I'm much more actually aligned with you. Like, Moira had me hooked in like a paragraph, and I was like, yes,
yeah,
I want to marry you.
Yeah, she seems
and
great.
I was angry at Dwight like the entire time. I was like, she is amazing. I was angry at Dwight the entire time, but I've been trying to ignore that.
I know. It's why otherwise it'd just be like 3 hours of us being like, Dwight's a piece of shit. But like her patience at the art gallery is incredible. Like, this woman is a saint by comparison. And I love the fishing weekend where they go fishing and it's super busy, right? Because like everyone is like, oh, like fishing is the thing to do at the end of the world for whatever reason. And even in the final, it's so frustrating. It's like, I kept thinking, yeah, but like they're gonna get drunk and sleep together. Like, that has to be how this ends. There has to be some resolution to this relationship, and there just isn't. He commits to his delusion in the end. He's like, you know, I like it in Australia well enough, but I'm going home at last, home to Connecticut. I'll tell her you turned what might have been a bad time for me into a good time. I'll tell her that you did that, although you knew right from the start there was nothing in it for you. I'll tell her it's because of you I've come back to her like I used to be, and not a drunken bum. I'll tell her that you made it easy for me to stay faithful to her and what it's cost you. which demonstrates that he's known the whole time what he's doing. It's not like in the final instance he suddenly realizes, oh, I've completely used you for my own purposes. He's known the whole time. And I just think that makes it so much worse. I think there's a version of this character where she has to sit him down at the end of this fishing trip and be like, you failed me. But no, he's known the whole time. And he's chosen to keep going forward anyway. And I love the way that kind of ratchets up the tragedy of this situation. That's brilliant.
That final speech by Dwight, you just said, like in my head, I have such a vivid like Humphrey Bogart saying, "Look, doll, we can't be together." Like that kind
100%.
of voice. Yeah.
Yeah. Ugh.
I was actually really disappointed that he did not. He's such a literal dude that I really wanted him to take the sub and literally go back to the U.S. and like literally try to get back to his home and die there. It made so much sense to me because he kept talking about seeing his family again, and he's too literal for that to not mean he's going to go back.
Well, but he follows orders in the end, which is to take the submarine offshore and orders. He invents hypothetical orders that he follows.
Yeah, but he could have sunk it off the shore of whatever side of the U.S. that his family's on and paddled himself onto shore and blah 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 blah.
I mean,
blah.
you're not wrong, but JM, that's not what his hypothetical orders would have hypothetically. What a fucking loser! He like invents orders for himself to follow. God.
That does sound very much like a dedicated military man, though.
Yeah. Sucks.
It would have taken him like a few weeks to get to America, right? He probably would.
Damn.
Yeah, he would have had to have left, a X number of days before and have enough crew that were wanting to also go back and die at home. So I don't know.
Well, yeah, that's true because he does say like half of his crew have like women on shore and stuff like that. Not him. Not our boy Dwight.
Yeah.
Did either of you have the newspapers little paragraph?
The
marked?
Newspapers. Oh, the I have the Grand Prix radio. I don't have the newspaper. What's the newspaper?
This was one of the most poignant bits in the whole thing for me, just because of how apropos it is. But shortly before Mary and Peter take the pill, and she's like, "Is this really real? How did this start? And is there anything that we could have done about it?" And he says, "Newspapers. You could have done something with newspapers. We didn't do it. No nation did, because we were all too silly. We liked our newspapers with pictures of beach girls and headlines about cases of indecent assault, and no government was wise enough to stop us from having them that way. But something might have been done with newspapers if we had been wise enough." So he's basically just saying, if we had been educated, if we had strove as a culture for education and to be aware of what's going on, then the end of the world would not have happened. And 50 years, 50, 70 years later, that's where we are.
Yep. Great stuff. Really cool that we've learned from all of our Wait, hold on. Did we? Have we learned nothing? Yeah, I mean, here's the complication. That's true, right? Like, that's true that giving in to, like, titillation and, the news always looking for the most scintillating angle. Anytime there's, like, an assault or a murder, that's, like, front page news. Even though it really shouldn't be, it doesn't really change the world in any particular way. We have all these big, important things happening in the world that we don't want to talk about. At the same time, I was hardline on that for the longest time of like, yeah, like unless it's something real, we shouldn't be dealing with it. At the same time, the world's a really hard place, and I don't begrudge anyone for like something they enjoy that is maybe like not highbrow. Like, I don't watch reality TV, but I get it. Like, I understand that like consumer culture has its place and that like sometimes you just need that dopamine. But yeah, we need better frameworks to intervene on that when it becomes unhealthy, right? Like, you know, if we were a responsible society, someone would unplug TikTok at the wall and be like, you're never allowed to do this ever again. If we were responsible in that regard. We're not, because advertising and capitalism and all the things we talk about on the show all the time. But it's so interesting to me that Shute, even with his politics, right? And this is where it's complicated, because I don't think he's saying I don't think he's saying that consumer culture is the culprit. I think he's saying exactly what you said, JM, which is, yeah, if we were more educated, right? And I think that if you follow the rabbit all the way down the hole on that kind of line of thinking from his perspective, I think that you would probably find that to be born from a kind of conservative framework of the world that probably isn't aligned to the current conservative framework of the world, right? Like, I think it's like of the time and of the era, and especially as like a military guy, right? He's not just saying like, oh, we need better education. He's also in a position where he has access to information other people don't, right? That's kind of what he's leveling here as an argument, is that if we had better information systems, then the end of the world wouldn't happen, and that's 100% right. We live in an era of short form video and the progeneration of these tools that produce null information, right? That everyone is saying is going to change the world, and it's so farcically stupid as a concept, because it's like you have to manufacture desire for null information, and you have to manufacture systems that promote scintillating content and entertainment that is arousing. I don't mean that in the sexual sense, but in the like cognitive sense. You have to build these systems that are so anti-human that Shute in the 50s reads the tea leaves and goes, yeah, if only we'd had better newspapers, right? And especially in Australia, right? Like, historically, we've had Murdoch own every single newspaper. The Australian sets the national conversation for the day and is deeply in bed with our Conservative Party, and that corruption was present back then as well. And yeah, even a conservative guy in the 50s has more common sense than some of our kind of quote unquote thought leaders that are CEOs and that are posting on LinkedIn about their latest revelation. I think it's an incredibly embarrassing indictment of humanity that even this conservative guy in the 50s, this military guy in the 50s, has something more concise to say about the state of society and what we should aspire to than half of the fucking people that are, leading the conversations in our society at the moment and that are running our governments. It's fucking embarrassing that that's the case, and it's very poignant from Shute to key onto that.
Mm-hmm. Bit undercut coming from Dwight, though. He's a fucking Philistine. He's like, no one should enjoy anything other than facts and news.
Yeah, he is a like, your facts don't care about your feelings type guy.
Yeah.
It's also interesting from, thinking about the era when Shute wrote this, that capitalism had, at least in like America, had not utterly ruined so much of everyday people's lives. And so like the way that he wrote that little paragraph of how he's talking about what government has not protected us from, it's kind of entirely different now. He was talking more about like kind of like people being distracted or something. He wasn't talking about like the corporations that are making the software that is laying off millions of people that can no longer afford rent, and so they're racking up the credit card debt and on and on and on and on. And like all of these capitalist things that are currently like the biggest problem wasn't even like that. Back when he wrote this, it was like one salary provided for everything without a problem. So like the problems that he's writing about are still relevant today, but also entirely different.
Sort of. Like, yes, and sorry, not to undercut your point. Yes, and except that, like, Marx has already happened by this point. We know that capital is like destroying the fabric of subjectivity already, even without the internet, right? The internet just, exponentially accelerates these problems. So yes, but also people are still seeing like the foundational aspects are there already. Even if you're correct, the specific context is different. The underlying motivations and the systems that inform the problems are the same. It's just the symptoms of the problems have evolved drastically, and look very different now.
It would be kind of interesting. What was his what was Schute's background? An engineer or something, right?
He was he was like a naval engineer, and then he became like a aviation engineer during World War II.
So think how different this would have been written had he been like an economist and he was writing the same story, you know?
Well, I think a good
it'd be very different, I imagine.
Yeah. Like a good point of comparison would be like Tolkien is writing at the same time. And by comparison, Tolkien is so socialist in comparison to Shute. Like, I'm not saying that, I don't want to be misunderstood. I'm not saying Tolkien was a socialist, but his perspective is so much more anti-war, anti-establishment, anti-capital than Shute. And like, yeah, I think that would be fascinating. I'm sure someone is writing that at the time. Like I Am Legend that we're reading next time, like that's definitely a different perspective on reality that is far closer to not an economist perspective certainly, but like it's far closer to like a normal person's understanding of reality than a military man. Because yes, you're right. So much of this is informed by the fact that Shute is embedded within this military infrastructure and is embarrassed by his writing. Right? He initially writes under a pen name because he doesn't want people to stop taking him seriously. Right? Yeah.
Because a writer is not a serious profession.
Exactly. Well, I think that tells you a lot about his politics in the context of the military at the time, right?
So we have evolved so much. Men are finally becoming good partners and good fathers, and now we can even write.
And it's still not a serious profession, apparently. So that's cool. My favorite like of the era thing that I learned recently is that you know how like people talk about Lord of the Rings as like this generational, like genre defining, body of work. Basically Tolkien was like begging the publishers, he had a publishing deal and he was like, please publish these fucking books. I'm so poor. I need money so badly. Like people talk about it as this like epic work, and it's like, no, he was a spider spinning a web because he needed to eat. And I fucking love that. I love learning that like actually these historical figures were just guys out here being dudes,
Well, I love how Frank Herbert, the author of Dune, the first Dune book was published by a company that made automotive manuals because no other publishing company would take his book.
Awesome. I love shit like that. Yeah.
It's funny because that's kind of one of the arguments that I had against The Road when I was saying, like, as an author, why would you want to write this book? And I was coming at it purely from an artistry standpoint. And like it didn't, at that point, it didn't even enter my brain like he needs money. Like he had to write something, and this was an idea.
I have to be really honest with you. In 2005, McCarthy did not need to write a book. Like like, I mean, that could have been a motivation to eat, but like, he was already the most famous author on the planet next to Stephen King. I think he was probably fine. Well, I guess J.K. Rowling at that point. However,
I'll go back to my opinion that the book was irrelevant then. Fine, you talked me into it.
Yeah, one of the greatest works of literature. It's just irrelevant. Don't worry about it. The work is the work, right? Like you do it because for the love of the game, right? That's the other thing.
Yeah, and that's another point I was going to make about like there was this derogatory language we were talking about with Dwight and Peter going out and working because that was the thing to do, but also like there's a joy in work. So it, I mean it's hard to say, he was right to leave Mary at home, but also she supported him and told him to go, and if he got a joy out of going to work, then that's no different than us getting a joy out of creating videos or whatever.
Well, I think that Shute would make a distinction, which is that he talks about, and the language he uses is very specific. Going back to Pat's point before, he says the dignity of work. It's not about joy. It's about like, it's something slightly more insidious than joy. It's like presentation and status and appearing to do the right thing and appearing to be like the right type of person. Or to feel like you're the right type of person. Maybe appearing is a little unfair. So I would make a slight distinction.
I think work is probably also patriotic. If your nation is like, like one of the most powerful in the world, it's leading every other country, and it's built on, industry and institutions, then it's your patriotic duty to like contribute to that,
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and especially with a character like Dwight, where it's like, the US is the superpower in the world, right? They just, along with Russia, they just settled World War II. They're at the height of their powers. And they're essentially in control of the planet when he's writing this book. Yeah, it's an interesting sort of point of comparison with the Road, where it's like, you don't even get McCarthy thinking about government, period. Like institutions, just, it's not even a thing that's even dwelt on. It's a purely individualistic novel in that sense. And maybe that's why I think that Shute is a more interesting author. Though I prefer The Road as a novel, I think Shute's a more interesting author because he's dealing with institutions that he's very familiar with, that he has a great knowledge of, and trying to poke holes at like, okay, where is that insufficient, and where does he agree with the perspective of them? Because it is patriotic. Like, it's patriotic to like serve the military, right? That's one of those underlying myths that makes a military function, is that like patriotism is necessarily good for a country, and that nationalism is necessarily required for a country. That I think JM's 100% onto something. I would love to see a version of this book written today. I think it would be so radically different, and be dealing with such radically similar yet different, power structures and ideas.
Yeah, like one of the things that would be very interesting is throughout the book, they are kind of like slowly losing touch with other places in the world. They're only able to communicate over the wireless via Morse code. And the same thing would happen only with like the internet and like TikTok, one would assume. Like if there's not humans around to keep the machines running, then maybe they just slowly shut down and we start losing sections of the internet in different parts of the country, and then it goes further, and now you've got the people who are having their party, and all of them are holding up their phones, and they keep trying to swipe, and there's nothing there, and they keep doing it because they've had decades of and they can't get it out of their system, even though there's nothing here anymore for them to look at. There's so much interesting stuff.
I just had a vision of the modern version of this book. It follows a meth addict who's forced to get clean because there's no more meth in the world, and in the last weeks of his life, he sees the beauty, starts seeing the beauty in the world as he sobers up, and it's tragic because he's about to die.
Damn,
that's my pitch.
I like that.
That's sort of a subplot in The Walking Dead, kind of, but it's an alcoholic.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it Just in the interest of time, I guess the last two things I wanted to touch on is that John wins the final Grand Prix, which is cool. There's like one
Mhm.
good thing that
I mean-
happens.
The scene with his mother is pretty tragic, though. She leaves him that note. It's like it's really heartbreaking.
Yeah, he like goes out for something, and then she just like kills herself while he's out.
Mm.
I mean,
But
it's
also the
heartbreaking.
least heartbreaking way that could have been done. Like, does that make
yeah.
sense?
Oh, 100%. But it's all like that, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
The Grand Prix, the interesting thing about it, though, I thought, was that it was a total aside. Like,
Yes.
they missed the radio broadcast because they were out fishing,
Mhm.
and they just heard, oh, John won, and then that was kind of like it. You know, one would have thought there would be an entire chapter where you're at the race and you're maybe from like John's perspective when he's racing or something, but all of that is skipped over.
I actually really like that. Now that I'm thinking about it, how it there wouldn't have been anything new, I think, compared to the scene we did get with the qualifying stuff. It's all there, people careening and dying, and just yahooing their last days on this earth, like, and then to have to shift the perspective of hearing about the result from Moira and Dwight's perspective. I like it. That's some creative structuring right there.
Well, and it structurally reflects the decision that Dwight and Moira make, which is that they can't see the Grand Prix if they go fishing. So the vehicle of the novel structurally delivers the same experience of the characters, which is they miss it. Because it's now it's a question of like opportunity cost, right? They have days left. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of stories are not that. There's got to be like a level of authorial discipline to say that, I can't show the race because they said they can't see the race. Like, so many filmmakers would just like show clips of the race on TV or something like that.
Yeah, George Lucas could never. It's the required restraint from Shute here is it's tremendous, and you can tell he's a guy who likes cars. He's a guy who likes machines. And it's fucking brilliant. Like it's a radio announcement, and then you move on, and it's done, and that's it. And it's not like to Pat's point before, it's not a climax. It's not this great victory lap at the end of the world, pun not intended. It's sad and meaningless ultimately, but it means something to John, right? In the final instance, he goes, this card won for him the race that was the climax of his life. Why trouble to go further? He took the red carton from his pocket, took the tablets from the vial, and threw the carton on the ground. No point going on. This was the way he'd like to have it. He took the tablets in his mouth and swallowed them with an effort. In the final instance, he does the thing he wanted to do, and that's all he needed. And that was the last meaning he could make in his life. And like Moira and Dwight don't get to be there for that, because that's how life is, right? Whether the apocalypse is coming in 2 days or a week, there is there's a materialism that Shute gets at with this structural choice where I think sometimes people overplay this and they go, well, life's about decisions, and like, they talk about people like we're like these kind of free moving, like, Newtonian objects, where it's like, well, if you just chose for your life to be different, it would be. It's like people are more complicated than that. But it's so good. It's such a cool, simple choice from Shute that just really drives home the tragedy of these like closing, what is ultimately ours at this point.
That scene is also really interesting because John had basically like preserved the car as much as is physically possible so that if someone were to survive, they could come back and everything was like sitting in oil so that it could be put back together and it would still function. And I wonder if this was intentionally like contrasting against the submarine, which was scuttled for no reason instead of potentially preserving it if there was going to be a future humanity that could come along and use it. You got one guy that's preserving technology and one guy that's destroying it.
Well, yeah, and I think that the novel is pretty judgmental about that, right? Like, Dwight robs Moira of companionship in the final moments of their life. I've literally highlighted their last conversation, and then in my marginalia it just says "fuck this guy." But the line of dialogue that he says is I've been asked to. She says, "Can I come with you?" She finally builds up the courage to ask him, and he says, "I've been asked the same thing by 4 men this morning. I've refused them all because Uncle Sam wouldn't like it. I've run this vessel in the Navy way right through, and I'm running her that way up till the end. I can't take you, honey. We'll each have to take this on our own." She says, "That's all right. You've got your..." And then, they have the final conversation. And he says, "You're wearing the same outfit that you wore the first time we met." She smiled faintly. "Keep him occupied. Don't give him time to think about things, or perhaps he'll start crying. Have I done my job right, Dwight?" He says, "Very right indeed." He took her in his arms and kissed her, and she clung to him for a minute. Then she freed herself. Don't let's prolong the agony. We said everything there is to say. What time are you leaving?" And she says, "What time will you be sinking her?" 30 miles down the bay and then 12 miles out, 42 sea miles. I shan't waste any time, say 2 hours and 10 minutes after we cast off from here. She says, "I'll be thinking of you. Go now, Dwight. Maybe I'll see you in Connecticut one day." He says, "No, go on now, or I'll be the one that starts crying." And then he says, "Thanks for everything." And he turned and went away down the gangway to the submarine. And yeah, rough. She has the thought, she could not go with Dwight because of naval discipline, and that she understood. Yet she could be very near him when he started home, only about 12 miles away. If then she turned up by his side with a grin on her face, perhaps he would take her with him, and she could see Helen hopping around on the pogo stick. She hurried out through the dim, echoing cabins of the dead aircraft carrier, and found the gangway, went down to the quay with her big car. There was plenty of petrol in the tanks. She filled it up from the cans hidden behind the hay the previous day. She got into it and opened her bags that were still there. And then she drives out to the beach. But it's like, even in the final moment, when he decides to go and sink this ship, it's kind of for no reason. And the rules that he's following are kind of for no reason. As opposed to John, I think that the book paints as a bit more of like... John's kind of more of a romantic soul, I think, in some ways.
So the one argument that I've been able to come up with to maybe give him some credibility is, I don't know what is required of a nuclear submarine if there's no one there to take care of it. So what if some pockets of humanity survive, but if you don't take care of a nuclear submarine's like fission core for 10 years, it explodes. And now all of those pockets of humanity die. So what if him sinking it was literally what Uncle Sam wanted because that was what is safest for people? That's a stretch, but
I don't
we've been ragging on Dwight the whole time.
I'm not trying to be too judgmental. I guess the reason I'm saying all of this, and the reason I keep harping on it, is the book is very clear about its perspective on Dwight, I feel. Yeah, and then, she drives out, and we get the kind of final... So Peter and Mary died home together. It's so sad, but it's very quick. Something that I think, to your point, Jam, about restraint, something that I find very impressive about Shute here is he knows... He has a really good sense for when to prolong these scenes and when to keep them really tight. Like, John's is quite tight. Peter and Mary's is quite tight. And then to Pat's point, Moira is kind of our protagonist in a lot of ways. And so she gets a bit more of the page space.
I was hearing like swelling music as she was driving.
Oh, yeah.
Romantic final scene as she's like wiping back tears and chugging down brandy and dodging cars on the desolate highway. It's like it was so vivid in my imagination, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of in a lot of ways, she was the protagonist for a whole lot of the book, because it was her actions that were putting people in different places. And I mean, not a lot of it was big, but usually Dwight was going places because she was like, yo, come, let's go places.
Yeah. I think in the total summation of the book, she probably is. Like, there's a reason why we're with her at the end.
One other interesting thing was how long, and like obviously this was very intentional on Shute's part, but how long they kept playing with the idea that we have to do the proper things, even though we're literally dying right now. Like Mary is like, the rats are going to eat the electrical cords if you don't cut the power. So before we die, cut the power so the house won't burn down. And I'm sitting here like, what?
Yeah,
Have you
wild.
not learned anything? But then also he does it because he doesn't want the house to burn down.
What's that? Because it's their apartment. Like, I think that, humans are these contradictory creatures, and we can hold two truths at the same time, which is like, we're gonna die and never see this house again. And also, well, it's my fucking house. I don't want it to burn down.
I would have been the opposite. I would have been like, get out the kerosene. I'm setting fire. I want to burn it down.
Okay. All right.
I'm going out with a bang.
Absolute drama queen. Yeah, I could see that. But no, I love Moira's kind of the way she goes about. The sea lay before her, grey and rough with great rollers coming in from the south onto the rocky beach below. The ocean was empty and grey beneath the overcast, but away to the east there was a break in the clouds and a shaft of light striking down to the waters. She parked across the road in full view of the sea, got out of the car, took another drink from her bottle, and scanned the horizon for the submarine. Then as she turned towards the lighthouse on Point Lonsdale and the entrance to Port Phillip Bay, she saw the low grey shape appear, barely 5 miles away, and heading southwards from the heads. She could not see detail, but she knew that Dwight was there upon the bridge, taking his ship out on her last cruise. She knew he could not see her, and he could not know that she was watching, but she waved to him. Then she got back into the car because the wind was raw and chilly from south polar regions, and she was feeling very ill, and she could watch him just as well when sitting down in shelter. She sat there dumbly watching as the low grey shape went forward to the mist on the horizon, holding the bottle on her knee. This was the end of it. The very, very end. Presently she could see the submarine no longer. It had vanished in the mist. She looked at her little wristwatch. It showed 1 minute past 10. Her childhood religion came back to her in those last minutes. Why not to do something about that, she thought. A little alcoholically she murmured the Lord's Prayer. Then she took out the red carton from her bag and opened the vial and held the tablets in her hand. Another spasm shook her, and she smiled faintly. "Foxed you this time," she said. She took the cord out of the bottle. It was 10 past 10. She said earnestly, "Dwight, if you're on your way already, wait for me." Then she put the tablets in her mouth and swallowed them down with a mouthful of brandy, sitting behind the wheel of her big car. And that's all we get.
Yeah, it was another abrupt ending.
Yeah, another abrupt ending. Like, it's so fascinating how willing Shute is to not, linger in these, thoughts of, like, we don't get like a big soliloquy from her. It's just simple and abrupt and the book's over. Yeah.
It's like a minimalist, like painter, only it's like that version in the prose.
Yes, 100%. Well, yeah, if McCarthy's a maximalist stylist, Shute is a minimalist for sure.
Oh, is there anything to be said about the fact that both The Road and this one end on like shots of water and things swimming / moving through the water?
Is it what's moving in the water in The Road?
It's a weird thing where he starts talking about how fish used to grow up there and the moss on their backs painted countries of maps of the world or something. It was eloquent and made no sense at all.
It's a big metaphor.
Big metaphor. Yeah, it's well. I think that at the end of the world, the in these apocalypses, the thing that survives is like ocean life, and that's where we came from. And that's the thing that endures, right? And so I think there's a poignancy to having it be water, where it's like, yeah, we crawled out of there so long ago, and now in the last instance, that's all that remains is the the great shapes moving beneath the waves, right?
Yeah, and it could be pointing out that like we will come back out of there again at some point. Like humanity could evolve
maybe.
again, and all of this would start over.
I hope if we do, we have like
Or it
horns
might mean
something,
nothing.
Like I want, you know what I mean? Something fun.
Rhino people.
Yeah, something different. Also, the sea is just like a classic like metaphor in literature. Like it's the ocean makes you feel small, etc. and so forth. Like there's a heritage of that.
I was gonna say the beach is the place to kill yourself for sure. Like not to get too dark, but like I think most people would sort of
Actually,
think that.
Is that how Book of Eli ended? Was she on the boat going across the water when it ended?
Nah, she's walking back because she's got the Beats headphones in. If you recall, one final shot of product placement. But yeah, like water's there. Like it's just it's a really useful and meaningful metaphor. Andor is full of water. For that reason, it's.
Well, I was gonna say the Rogue One ends on people dying on a beach. Yeah, that's another everyone dies story.
It is, and like to be fair, like Andor as a character his metaphor is water, right? Like he grows up on that planet and they're by the lake. He escapes the prison, using water, and then they swim away. There's a whole thesis to be written about the use of water in that particular character's story by Gilroy. But yes, I think it's just poignant. And I guess I'm curious. Maybe it's After London. I have to reread it, which I want to do before next time, because that's a big influence on I Am Legends. But I'm curious if that comes up in After London, and if that's where that imagery starts in the apocalypse genre. I'm not super sure. So I'll come back to you.
Really funny that you brought up Rogue One, because David was telling me about this book like maybe a couple of years ago. I don't remember why we were talking about it. And from the description, I had always pictured Rogue One. I thought that like the nuclear war that happened and people were on the beach literally watching the mushroom cloud, in Australia, they were watching the mushroom cloud come towards them. So they only had like hours left to live, and they were literally able to watch, just like Rogue One, watch it come towards them. That's what I was picturing the whole time before I read the book. And then it turned out to just be like the air was poison. And I was like, oh, that's disappointing.
No such drama to be had here. All right, good stuff. Anything else?
Nope.
Cool. Okay. Well, that'll do it for On the Beach. Absolutely cracking read. Next time we are reading I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. The whole book, it's like 150 pages. You'll do it in a sitting. It's real quick. So that'll be interesting. I remember really, really liking the book and thinking the film didn't do it justice at all. So I'm very curious coming back to it, what we think. Have you guys read I Am Legend before?
Nope. I've seen the movie.
I know that I know it's entirely different, but I have not read it.
Oh, it's going to be so good. So yeah, if you're reading along, read the whole book. It's really quick. It's a very quick read. But that's us. If you would like to support us, you can head to patreon.com/zeroindent. Supporting us at the $5 tier unlocks the bonus episodes of this show where we watch and talk about supplementary materials. We will be watching the film adaptation of On the Beach for our next piece of coverage. It's free on YouTube because it's real old. So you can go watch that in preparation. Free Patreon subscribers gain access to the Zero Indent Patreon chat where you can send us questions and ideas for future episodes directly. Any support you can give us helps keep us making thoughtful, independent media criticism, an important practice to preserve in an age where context is defined by algorithms. We appreciate all of our Patreon subscribers. Help us continue to make the shows and articles that shape Zero Indent. And as always, it's just the end of the show. It's not the end of the world. Zero Indent is an independent publication dedicated to studying works of genre fiction, brought to you by our subscribers. Head to patreon.com/zeroindent to learn more and consider supporting us. Our theme song is The Swan by Alon Peretz. Our podcast cover art is by Crystal Hatay. Everything else is written, directed, and edited by me, DC McNeill. You can find our merch and books at underink.press and everything we do at zeroindent.com.